Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 382 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and tonight I am joined by the greatest hostess in the entire universe, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
1994's The Crow was a Highlander movie. I will not explain further.
That's, I never saw The Crow. I know a little bit about it, but...
Get out.
Okay.
Okay, seriously. Film track of it, like, this week.
Okay.
Of course, I don't know if it's on Amazon Prime.
We will do our hunting, but yeah, no, I totally know why you're upset. The teenage goth girl Aaron Paulette going. The Crow. This is my movie.
Yeah, but it's a genuinely good movie too. How did you? How?
That I don't know.
Why?
It never happened. But yeah, no. I mean, I've seen a few Brendan Lee films that he was quite the actor. It is a shame that he ended up passing away during the filming of that. But yeah, no, just didn't fall in my lap, I guess.
All right, well, it is on Amazon Prime. It is not free, but you can rent it for like $4. I think that's very reasonable.
All right. Well, I will be remedying that nonsense.
Good. So how am I doing? Well, I'm doing much better now, but since like Friday, I've been in quite a bit of pain, and just buy stocks in Tiger Balm, folks. That's really all I have to say about that. But, so it took me a while to figure out why I was hurting, because the trigger incident must have happened like a week prior or something like that. I don't know, maybe it was earlier in the week. But, I'm taking Tilly for one of her walks, and she goes up to meet someone, and, he's a dog owner. They've got a dog, Ruby. Our dogs have met, they play together, and so, he's petting her, and he's talking to her, and so I'm not aware that a neighbor behind us with her dog has walked up and said hello. My first warning is that my mom says, "Oh, look, here's Sam," and I think in that exact moment, Tilly turned at my mom's voice, saw another dog, and she raced towards that dog, and she whipped me around so fast, I couldn't tell you which direction I turned. I don't know if I was whipped to the right or to the left. I think it was to the left because of the way I'm hurting. Now, Tilly is like 23 and a half pounds, but she almost ripped the leash out of my hands and pulled me off my feet. I was so off balance that I chose to sit down, one, so that I wouldn't get pulled over, and two, so I could control her. I want to explain, she wasn't being aggressive at all. It was just, new friend must meet. And everyone asked me if I was okay, and I'm going, I'm okay right now. We'll see how it's like in the morning. And in the morning, I woke up and I felt fine. And I even had a chiropractic adjustment later that week. But something happened. I don't know what. But it really started hurting me. And it was one of these things where it hurts to walk. If I cough or sneeze, wow, I didn't know that engaged those back muscles. Ow. So, yeah, kids, when you hit middle age, it's not fun. So between, like, the Tiger Balm and a leave back in muscle pain, I made it through, and I'm slowly getting better. So, hooray for decrepitude. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing all right. We're my dad's birthday is on Valentine's Day, so we went up to for his birthday party over the weekend, and then I've been home. It's the start of February break for my daughter, and of course we're recording on President's Day, so everybody was at home, and my wife decided it was time for her and my daughter to all of us to do some well-needed cleaning of the house, and that started with arguments and upset feelings, but luckily it got better from there. Somebody posted a meme that said, I never realized how annoying I was till I created a miniature version of myself and argue with it daily. That got my wife laughing. Essentially, it's my wife's personality, but not my wife's social adjustments at my volume. So yeah, and
with your ADHD, hooray!
Yeah, and Larry the Mouse has made frequent appearances today, and he officially no longer respects space-time, because I honestly, just before we started recording, I went up to refresh my beverage, and he was actually on top of the kitchen island. He jumped down onto the floor and ran into the bathroom, and I thought for sure, oh, he's behind. We got a little cabinet in there. He's behind that. So I pulled the cabinet out because I definitely had found mouse poop behind that earlier. And nope, everything's fine under there. And the only thing I can think of is he went into the radiator, maybe, but I packed it all full of steel wool. There shouldn't be a way through there. So he can phase through walls. So that's...
I mean, I was about to say, in D&D, there's a creature known as a phase spider, and I think Larry is a phase mouse.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's some form of Tanari or Tiefling. It's not a real mouse. So yeah, that's been my day. A lot of cleaning they were cleaning out something and like, oh, there's mouse poop here. Oh, there's mouse poop there. So I've just been vacuuming it all up. It's been delightful.
Hantavirus.
I mean, yeah, I don't really want to think about that too much, but yes, that is a possibility. I mean, luckily most people don't actually contract it and have a major issue with it, but thanks Aaron.
Was that a mousetrap I just heard go off?
No, that was just me laughing.
It sounded like a snap. Okay.
I wish. No, actually, so that I'd forgotten about that one. No, one of the times I walked into the kitchen, saw the mouse in the middle of the floor, he saw me and ran and used a mousetrap as a step stool to jump up over the steel wool that I had packed underneath the dishwasher. Like, he's just showing off at this point. Yeah.
Okay, Weer'd. If you haven't read any books by Terry Pratchett, you should. And I don't know if you need to at this point. It might be aggravating. But what you're describing is very, very similar to some of the events that happened in The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents.
Yeah, that's kind of how that's rolling out. But yeah, no, literally, I said that to my wife. I just saw, it was one of the like crappy plastic traps. My wife just saw those on Amazon. They weren't very expensive. She's like, aha! This is going to be the latest thing. And I just like told her, I said, I don't want to rain on your parade, but we've got snap traps all over the place here. I don't see how that's going to change things. And, now officially literally use the trap, and not the dummy end of the trap that you would pick it up by. No, use the live end of the trap as a step stool to jump up over. Same thing with got the little sonic repellers. Oddball found Woot.com was having a sale on them, And so it's just one of those, like, oh, that's not much money. You know, there was like a 6-pack of these, you know, little devices. They kind of look like plug-in air fresheners, but supposedly they emit a sound that humans can't hear, but is obnoxious as heck to mice. And I have, we have the kitchen island that we put a plug underneath it, and we've plugged 2 extension cords into it, so you can plug appliances in to work on the island. And so I just said, oh, I'll throw because the mouse likes to hang out on the island, because we can tell because there's poops on it, and I just saw him jump off it. There was so I plugged one of those in, and at one point I was reaching down to unplug it so I could plug a crock pot into that plug. And as I'm looking down, directly past the plug was a pile of mouse poop. So literally he took a dump directly underneath the obnoxious repelling trap. So yeah, that's we're doing great. We're doing great.
Just charge him rent.
I'm allergic to him. My daughter was saying, who knows? It was all the dust we were kicking up to, cleaning all the stuff. But everybody was having allergy symptoms, myself included. I don't know if it was from the mouse or from dust and just other stuff that we were kicking up. But yeah, it was it'd be great just charge him rent. There's the old the old Catholic joke is baptize him. That way we'll only see him on Christmas and Easter.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately we need to tackle this next story, Aaron.
Must we?
I mean,
I really don't want to.
Yeah. There has been another mass shooting. I'm sure many of you have heard about this. It was in British Columbia, in Canada, and there were eight victims killed, and a few more injured. Hopefully they will recover. These were most of them were younger kids. It was probably what would be the equivalent of a middle school. I'm not exactly sure if Canada does the exact same grade separations as we do, and honestly speaking, we don't necessarily do the same grade separations. It's up until high school, all bets are off. But yeah, there's still a lot of details that are not that aren't known just yet, and I think some of which are intentionally being kept quiet, such as what firearms were used and who owned them. Certainly, it's been said the killer was 18 years old and took their own life when police arrived. According to reports, the police actually took some fire from the school as they were staging to enter. But when they did enter, they found that the killer had already taken their own life, and they had very similar to the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. The killer had killed their mother and their half brother before they left for the school. So yeah, and similar to the Parkland situation, there were frequent police calls to the home for, they say, mental health reasons. I assume domestic violence was going on in the house. And the thing that I am tiptoeing around a little bit, mostly because I really don't want to dive into it too much, but the killer was a trans female. So they were born male. Now they identified as female at the time of their death. It's believed that they started transitioning at the age of 12, and as far as I could tell from everything I've read, there was no history of bullying. The mother was very accepting of all of this, and the motive is essentially completely unknown. And so, yeah, I don't know what more to say about
A sick individual who wanted to hurt people. There's your motive.
That's the thing, is the motive is this is a person with a history of violence, and clearly not enough was done. Though again, I can say that now, but also there's lots of people out there who are trans, who are mentally ill, who are this and that, who aren't violent at all. And there are people who do have some violence, do have some domestic incidents, need to have the police called on them, etc., but obviously don't do anything even remotely as horrific as this. Not murder or extreme violence of any kind, let alone a mass casualty event. So I've talked about this in previous shows and all that we don't have, like, there's been studies where people have sanitized the mental health records of spree killers and mixed them with people who had no violent history or who had minor violence, and saw if they could get the mental health professionals to figure out who's the bigger risk and who's not. And they absolutely could not figure out, this person went on to murder multiple people, and this person, may have had a few police interactions, but never did any serious harm. And the each of them are just like, if this was my patient, I wouldn't know. So yeah, it's clearly the gun laws did not do anything, and the healthcare system that is within Canada did not do anything. And so that's all I really have to say about the incident in itself.
I don't have anything new to say. I've said it before.
Yeah, no, I got you. So I'm going to pivot to this article, and I will just say right now, this is an older article than the one that I've got in the show notes, and there's probably more information that will come out by the time that people are hearing this. But the big factor that I wanted to put into this was the headline, which is: mass shootings in Canada have helped prompt changes to firearm laws over the decades. And that is about as great an example of the quiet part out loud, in the fact that they are saying that, these mass shootings are helpful, which is absolutely truthful from the eyes of anti-gun groups. They are absolutely invisible up until there is a major event, and then all of a sudden legislation gets pushed, media teams come out, rallies start happening, and the motivation is pretty clear, is when the firearms aren't in the news and tragic events aren't in the news, nobody is interested in discussing gun control. People are just fine with how the gun laws are in their states, whether it be a restrictive state or whether it be a very gun-friendly state. They don't want to change it. And only when emotions run high and people are upset and grief is setting in, that's when they feel the need to strike.
I think I've mentioned this before, but there is something known as the politician's syllogism. And it goes like this: something must be done. This is something. Therefore, we must do it. And that explains a lot about politicians. They don't necessarily do things because they think it's right. They do things because it makes the voters happy. And on the one hand, that's politics. You are answerable to your constituents, but I really hate it when that excuse is used to circumvent things such as common sense and, constitutional rights here in America, and, treating people as innocent until proven guilty rather than guilty until proven innocent, that sort of thing.
Yeah, when people say we have to do something, I like to bring up, and granted, there is some controversy in the story, but the death of President George Washington was he fell ill, and the doctors went, "Oh, the president is sick. We should do what doctors do, which is bloodletting, let out the bad humors." And of course, bad humors is absolutely, obsolete, disproven, biology that you can't, you are not afflicted with bad blood, and you cannot drain out the bad blood to make yourself more healthful. And in fact, losing blood weakens you and weakens your immune system, and so therefore can lead to your death. And so while it's not proven that George Washington's doctors killed him, certainly if you have any sort of medical background, you can tell that they certainly weren't doing him any favors. So we need to do something. Isn't necessarily, the something needs to be weighed with a sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think continuing on with we need to do something and spree killings around. This one is a bit disquieting, though again, I can kind of understand, at least on the financial level. Is headline: Gun accessory company to pay $1.75 million to Buffalo supermarket shooting victims. And
okay, great. If you understand it, you can explain it to me, because this doesn't make sense.
So I wasn't able to track it down exactly, because the articles that I've seen haven't been particularly forthcoming. But the company that Mean Arms, and it's based out of Georgia, essentially they specialize in ban compliant firearms accessories. They make a setup for your upper that allows you to run stripper clips into the action of an AR-15, therefore allowing you to rapidly top up a fixed magazine. They have equipment that you can put into the body of a magazine that takes they've got one that takes a 30 round PMag and turns it into a 10 round 9mm magazine. So it essentially, you can do, caliber conversion and essentially band compliance setup. And from my reading of the articles that I've looked into on this, supposedly this was a system that fixed a 10 round magazine into the receiver of this gun. At least that's how it's written out. Don't expect gun, reporters from major news outlets to understand anything about it. It could also have meant that the magazine was limited with one of their setups, and he simply took the magazine apart and restored it back to its original full capacity. But the statement was that essentially that because he was able to readily convert the gun back to a full capacity magazine firearm, that they're holding this company responsible. And I don't know how reasonable that is, but also, we saw with, Lucky Gunner, they managed to get their case against the Brady campaign dismissed in pretrial, and just in that pre-trial setup, the case hadn't even gone to trial. They spent over $250,000. So while I will never agree with laying down to anti-gun groups in these, these lawsuits that are designed to damage the gun industry and intimidate people that make guns and gun accessories. Financially, I can understand why one would do it.
Okay, so I have looked up the item in question, and this is the Mean Arms AR-15 maglock with shear bolt. And what it does is it replaces the magazine release. And when you install it, so you insert a 10-round magazine, you install the bushing into the magazine release receiver hole, and then tighten the hex-shape head until it shears off. This will leave the magazine permanently fixed into the magazine well. And so part of this lawsuit was because the Buffalo supermarket shooter removed the lock from his rifle, and because Mean Arms provides step-by-step instructions on the back of its product packaging on how to remove the lock. So let me see if I understand this properly. You have a product which makes a change to the rifle. That change is not easy to reverse because it is meant for gun safety in a restricted state, but it is still possible to remove this modification to your rifle in case you decide to move to a free state. Wow, how dare gun owners be allowed to make modifications to their rifles and remove what would normally be a permanent neutering of their firearm. Wow, how dare they? So explain to me, Weer'd, how that makes sense.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's again, back to our, early statement about the whole, when Biden was talking about the ghost guns and talking about like, oh, if anything you can make in 8 hours in a machine shop. Well, congratulations. Home Depot and Lowe's are now officially firearms manufacturers because you can go into the plumbing section and make a Sten gun or a Luddy, those being another bone simple gun that can be made out of stuff you can buy in a hardware store.
Okay, so Mean Arms weren't the only people that were being sued. The suit, there were separate suits against the family of the shooter, which, that's how civil suits work on the one hand. On the other hand, you're suing innocent people. I don't know how I feel about that. But they also sued the gun seller, Vintage Firearms LLC. And I don't know enough about this case to know if the gunman bought the gun or if he got the gun from someone else. But when you are suing an FFL whose only crime is we sold a firearm in good faith to someone who passed the background checks, and this was in New York where they have these stringent gun laws. I mean, this is right up there with, okay, someone got drunk and committed vehicular homicide. So we are now going to sue the liquor manufacturer and the car dealership that sold this person the car. And, well, I know that you all know how I feel about this. I don't know if this is lawfare designed to be a chilling effect, because in this case, it specifically worked. This particular FFL, Vintage Firearms, they've gone out of business, and the owner has said he's not going to get another FFL ever again. So again, I don't know if it's a chilling effect or if they're just, we'll throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, or we want to punish everyone. We're greedy, we want money. I don't know. It leaves a very bad taste in my mouth. But Weer'd, you know what also leaves a bad taste in my mouth here?
What's that?
It's the statement that every town law, which helped represent some survivors and victims' relatives, was involved in this. And in fact, they're the ones who said that Vintage Firearms has permanently closed, and its owner has agreed to refrain from obtaining an FFL in the future. So this is Bloomberg spreading his anti-rights, gun prohibitionist filth wherever he can. I can't wait for the man to die. That is not a threat. I mean, just, die of old age. Maybe he gets dysentery and craps himself to death on the toilet. I am so tired of this man spending what to him is pocket change, but for the rest of us is a life-changing amount of money simply because he thinks he can buy his way into heaven. And I'm not making that up. He said that in an interview.
That is a direct quote.
Something about how, it's something about how, he doesn't really believe in God, but if he, but if God exists, then, hopefully this anti-gun crusade will get Bloomberg into heaven. And it's just, that is not how that works. I really, really don't like the man.
And I am...
And Weer'd, I think you've said, because I expressed some concern about this in the past, like, okay, when Bloomberg dies, is the Foundation going to continue? Is there someone who will keep doing this? And I think you said something to the effect of, no, this is all about his ego, and when he goes, it's probably not going to continue. Do you remember that?
Yeah, essentially, I see no evidence that he is grooming a successor or anything like that. It is, in fact, it's all about him. He's in control. Again, I have my suspicions that he's also in control of Brady and Giffords and other gun control groups. Obviously, he's got the Michael Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is itself a gun control organization, and so I don't see somebody coming up. And again, Bloomberg's in his 90s. I'm not exactly sure how old he is right now, but again, he is at an age that if by the time this show comes out, news of his departure has happened, it's not like anyone's going to be, surprised. We just lost Robert Duvall today, and he was, I want to say he was in his 90s as well. And it's one of those, like, great actor. He will be missed, but it was his time, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so, the fact that I don't know who's going through, on another anti-gun billionaire that's causing problems is George Soros, and Soros has very clearly groomed his son Alex to carry his mantle after his departure. So while Bloomberg and his groups may disappear, there will still be George Soros and his agenda, at least as far as it's carried out by his son in the future. So that's how I see it. As I think the foundations will continue ahead. I don't know how well he's going to set up his will to prepare financially for his departure, but overall, I think that when Michael Bloomberg passes away, it will be a massive change to the gun control world.
Yeah, as you said, we'll still have Soros, but in this case, one is better than two. And so that'll be one less billionaire trying to deny us our rights. And while you were talking, I looked up Robert Duvall, and this was news to me. I didn't realize he had died today, but actually, no, he died yesterday, February 15th, and according to Wikipedia, he was 95 years old, so that's a very good run.
It's a very good run. We should all be so lucky. But yeah, and also with Soros, he has a lot of irons in the fire. Michael Bloomberg is almost exclusively focused, especially after he has left politics, or at least elected office. He's still in politics. After he's left elected office, he's really kind of just laser focused on gun control, versus George Soros has many, many agendas, of which the Assorted Caliber podcast has no opinion on. And I will also say that while we have been talking, I have found some videos on removing the locking device from a firearm that is using the Mean Arms mag lock, and one of them is essentially a more of an armorer sort of thing where there is a tool that you can disassemble the upper and drop the magazine so that you can clean it, replace it, that sort of thing. And in theory, you could replace it with a high capacity magazine at that point in time. But they specifically state removing the device and absolutely, it's drilling it out. They're essentially drilling out the core of the lock, and so it's one of those easily removed.
It's not something that's done easily, quickly, or conveniently.
Mm-hmm. And I will note that if we're going to if you're going to be, if you lose the keys to your house, hopefully, you'll be well, if you lose the keys and you tell a locksmith, I'd like to rekey my lock, he's not going to bother picking your lock open to get you back into the house and to gain access to all the hardware to change out the plug from your lock. And instead, he's just going to grab a power drill and just drill out the core, and ta-da, your lock is open. So it's one of those, it's easy for certain values of easy, but also at the same time, like, if you want to say this is easy, that's a very dangerous precedent to be starting.
Well, I mean, to use your logic here, if we follow Letitia James's reasoning, then when you lock yourself out of your house, you have to throw your house away and get another one.
I mean, or if you want to have an approved lock, and I'm trying to remember if New York has mandatory safe storage, but in theory, if your storage device either has a key lock or a key lock, or a backup key lock system, or I mean even your basic trigger locks, those are infamous for, you could just pull back the rubber shielding and fish around with an ice pick and a screwdriver and get your hands on the ratchet, the backside of the ratcheting mechanism, and essentially release it without ever touching the key. For those, for if you're considering drilling out this device that is in fact permanent, because again, you have to destroy it to remove it, then yeah, they're essentially saying most of the methods of securing firearms is also essentially easily bypassed.
Mm-hmm. So I looked up New York State storage laws, and they do have a law on the books, but it is not blanket. You are required to secure your firearm if you are living with a minor, someone who you know or has reason to know is prohibited from possessing a firearm. Oh, that's actually the same thing, just stated differently. Basically, if they're prohibited because of a temporary ERPO, or if they are, convicted of a felony, or Lautenberg Amendment things. So not everyone, if you're all law-abiding adults in the house, you don't have to have it locked up.
But also, therefore, if it's not some of the setups where I know a friend of mine had a mechanical gun vault, and I think actually maybe one of the tumblers wore out, but either way, but they weren't able to get back into it. So I think one of the wheels must have worn out, and so he called up the company and they sent a safe technician over, and the safe technician knew from the schematics where to drill to disable it. And essentially he said it took him like half a day just to get the safe open so he could get his guns out. Then they could haul the broken safe away and replace it with a replacement safe.
But nope, according to Letitia James, you gotta throw it all away. Throw away the safe, throw away the guns.
Correct. All right. Well, we got one more story from New York, and finally some good news. And this is from the Firearms Policy Coalition. FPC prevails in New York non-resident carry ban lawsuit, encourages people to apply for a license. And this is actually a really, really big story because I know California and New York are the two that I recognize, but there are very few states in the union that don't have provisions for a non-resident carry permit. And New York specifically does not recognize any out-of-state permit. So it doesn't matter what state you have a permit for. New York doesn't care. They're not going to honor it. And New York had no provisions for an out-of-state permit. And furthermore, as a resident of New England, I will note that New York State essentially divides the country completely on if you are in New England and you would like to travel into the rest of the state by vehicle, you are going to have to drive through New York. And so essentially the only way to do it as a non-New York resident before that was to work with the Firearms Owner Protection Act and have your guns locked and unloaded as you traverse the state of New York. Either way, FPC is encouraging people to apply. They've removed the requirement for employment or residence within the state, which was what they were previously using and why they would deny non-residents. And so they are encouraging people to apply for essentially a non-resident permit. And so therefore, if you're someone who frequently travels through the state of New York as a non-New York resident, FPC is encouraging you to apply. And I will personally say, if anybody out there is applying for a New York non-resident permit, I'd love to hear about your process. All right. So moving on to our segments. I was contacted by a member of the Boston Pink Pistols chapter wanting a soapbox to discuss an issue that's very important to Massachusetts with implications for all Americans. I am pleased to welcome to the Assorted Calibers podcast. This is Brendan. I met you through the Boston Pink Pistols. How you doing, Brendan?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. And you wanted to talk about the upcoming referendum in the November election. Now is the time to really start thinking about that. What's the law and what does it say? We talked about it on the show, but I'll let you start off.
Sure. So super quick, lightning fast recap. Back in July of 2024, Chapter 135 of the Acts of 2024 got signed into law by the governor. There were a whole bunch of different things in there that we can talk a little bit more about as I talk through like why it needs to be repealed. But basically the governor pitched this as like, generational change on gun safety, and this is going to make everybody's life so much better. Goal and what I think they're now calling themselves the Civil Rights Coalition kind of immediately jumped in on that and launched a referendum petition. I think it was the second week of August or something like that to repeal the law. And then by October, they had about 90,000 signatures, which is almost double what was necessary to put the law on hold pending the repeal referendum. The governor signed an emergency preamble, which generated a ton of chaos because all of the deadlines and the timelines that were in the law suddenly had to move to immediate implementation. And so...
Also, let me interrupt you real quick. What was the emergency?
Great question. Couldn't tell you. You would have to ask Maura.
Well, no, many people have, and she has not answered. So the emergency can be assumed as non-existent. But carry on. I just thought that's a fun factoid.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, there's basically no limitation on the governor's power to declare something an emergency in the Massachusetts Constitution. So, we can say all day that like this was obviously an attempt to prevent the suspension of the law. But unfortunately, shady and illegal are two completely separate concepts. So basically where we're at now is, as you noted, the referendum is on the ballot this year in November. And I'm a little worried about the message that's being sent out there in terms of who it's directed at right now, because kind of what I've seen so far is a whole lot of preaching to the choir. love to talk to them about it, love to talk to fellow gun owners about why it's bad and why they should get involved. But I think that if we want any kind of shot at actually repealing Chapter 135, we need to appeal to the people who are not gun owners. We need to appeal to the people who look at this and say, yeah, that seems fine. So that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, no, that's again, that's one of the core things that we try to do for the Assorted Calibers podcast, is making it Second Amendment political, but nonpartisan, because there's a whole lot of people on both sides of the aisle. And for a blue state like Massachusetts and blue states like New York and California and Illinois and all the other places, you know, Washington and Oregon, there are all these states that are enacting these really horrible and likely unconstitutional gun laws. The big issue you've got is even then you get to the Second Amendment organizations, and they are right-wing groups, of which I've got no problem. Be whatever politics you want, so long as you're pro Second Amendment, but that can often lead rifts between the people that are actually voting and are the bulk of the voters and the people who are fighting for Second.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it's kind of one of the things that really prompted me to start trying to engage a little bit more with this is, you know, I went to see what was going on with the repeal movement, and I ended up on CRC's website. There's a whole lot of conversations on there about like illegal criminal aliens and things like that. And I was like, that is not a message that I agree with, and also not one that's going to fly very well in Massachusetts right now. So, you know, I tried to tune the focus much more towards it's not really about the guns. Like, this law is not really about the guns. This is about the state legislature is continuing to abdicate their responsibility. In my day job, I do legislative drafting and analysis, actually. And so I like to start by saying that even if I agreed with every single provision of this law, it is terribly drafted. It is so poorly drafted that if I were in charge of it, I'd have kicked it back and said, start again. Start over. This is bad. You need to do better about this. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that just makes very clear they didn't talk to anybody who knows anything about guns. They did a whole bunch of Control F and then find and replace without actually looking at the context of the things that they were trying to replace. And it just really is, it's very clear that it was a rush, which, not for nothing, I guess good on the Massachusetts legislature for finally getting a fire lit under them and doing something in a single session. Lord knows it's not the budget. So just all told, there's really nothing good about this legislation, no matter what provisions that are in there that any individual person might agree with. So I mentioned that I do legislative drafting and analysis in my day job, and one of the sort of key things that I've come away with, I'm a drafting and analysis expert. Actually, it's a relatively rare field to be a member of, but it's great to be able to say that I have subject matter expertise in these sorts of conversations. And so I've come up with these 5 sort of key components of good legislation that I talk about every single time I'm doing my work in my day-to-day. And these are things that I pulled from, you know, peer-reviewed studies on forming democratic governments in third world countries and various other similarly related issues. And the 5 things are necessity, effectiveness, practicality, legality, and equity. Now, I can't talk about the legality of things. I'm not equipped to. I'm sure that we could have an hours-long conversation about the constitutionality of Chapter 135 and, you know, how much questionable ground it rests on. But the rest of these things are things that I am absolutely capable of talking about. And you don't need to take my word for it on these things either, which is great because there's actually a whole bunch of people who are responsible for implementing this law that have explicitly stated that they have some real issues with implementing this law. So the first thing that I really like to talk about every time I get a new piece of law in front of me is, what's the problem? Do we need to solve this problem? Is it something that requires government intervention to solve? And is legislation the best way to do it? So the question here is, what, as you said, is the emergency? Why was this necessary? And I'm hard-pressed to understand it. certainly we hear a lot about gun violence in our communities. We hear a lot about, this epidemic of gun violence. But the fact of the matter remains that Massachusetts has one of the lowest gun death rates in the country. And this is not from, some deeply biased source. This comes from the Gifford Center. Massachusetts is ranked very highly in terms of restrictiveness of gun laws and the low rate of gun deaths. And so I'm inclined to say that there's not really much good reason for implementing stricter gun laws if we're already one of the strictest in the countries and our gun death rate is so low. And then, then we move into the question of effectiveness. And this is the part that is really a huge sticking point for me, is that we know, and we have known for decades, exactly what it is that addresses crime in general and particularly violent crime. And it's economic conditions. It is, do you have a place to live? Do you have a place to get healthcare? Can you get food consistently? Do you have stability? And if the answer to those is no, then you tend to take action that provides you with a level of control that you don't have in your day-to-day life. My background, for my many sins, is I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in criminology. And both of those, I particularly focused on policy analysis, specifically critical policy analysis of looking at government programs and saying, what could we do better? Is this really accomplishing the goal that we want to accomplish? And so in criminology, that is, are we making crime happen less? The answer is, historically, for the last, longer than I've been alive, the answer is no. As a matter of fact, if you look at the way that the increase in law enforcement personnel and funding and decrease in crime goes, you do see a correlation there. But there's actually also a correlation with the expansion of the welfare state. That the more money we threw at this problem, actually, it turns out, the better things got. And we see that today as well with universal basic income pilots, with housing assistance during COVID, with baby bonds and things like that. Basically, the more money you throw at the problem, the lower crime gets in those areas where you're throwing the money at the problem. And so we've known this. We've actually known this since the 90s. We've known this since before then, but the 90s is really kind of when a lot of welfare programs expanded a lot. And yet we keep going back to, well, let's throw another crime on there. Let's make more things illegal, and that will certainly solve the crime problem. Make more crimes. So effectiveness, this is, like I said, it's my sticking point of we know that there are better ways to approach this. I look at to pull a specific example out is the ban on 3D printed firearms. This is a thing that Governor Healy has really touted as, oh, well, we're cracking down on ghost guns. It's going to be illegal to 3D print a firearm. But if you actually go and read the law, it says you can't 3D print a firearm unless you have a license to carry. Now, I might be misremembering something, but it was my understanding that it was already illegal to own a gun unless you had a license.
Correct. And before any of that went through, and there was, either 80% guns, or if you were going to, legit go into your machine shop and make a firearm, you could do that. But the moment it becomes a completed firearm and you don't have a license to carry here in Massachusetts, then you're committing a crime.
Exactly. And so the idea then is, okay, so it's now illegal to print a firearm, but as soon as that firearm was printed, it was a crime anyway. So it's just, okay, well, we're going to put a felony on a felony.
Make it more illegal.
Right. And so deterrence has been thoroughly debunked in criminological circles. Everybody has pretty much acknowledged at this point that there is no rational actor when it comes to crime, because crime is driven by irrational circumstances and emotion. It is emotive responses to circumstances beyond your control. As a general rule, there are certainly going to be some exceptions. But for me, I used to ride past Boston PD every single day on my commute. I was riding my bicycle, and that intersection right at Boston PD with cops everywhere, people just did the most illegal stuff, would almost hit cyclists, would almost hit pedestrians all the time. There could be a cop standing right there on the corner and they'd still do it. And it's not exactly subtle that it's Boston PD. Everybody knows what they're driving past. So that for me is kind of my greatest argument against deterrence doing anything. There's consequences right there waiting to happen. And people just go, I don't care. That's fine. No big deal. So really strongly opposed, just as a general rule, to carceral approaches to social problems. And that really is what 135 represents, is that we are acknowledging that, like, oh, if we made it easier for you to have a home, if we provided you with healthcare, if we didn't say that if you lost your job, congratulations, your entire life is ruined, if we went and we addressed those problems, root cause mitigation might ring a bell for some people, then we wouldn't have that level of crime. We wouldn't have that level of violence. And so it really kind of gets to me that the state legislature is out here going after this low-hanging fruit, going after this sort of acceptably undesirable group of people to attack and saying, hey, look at us. We virtue signaled good enough, and now we don't actually have to do any work for the next 10 years, right? So,
may I add on to it is the fact that, like, I haven't even really bothered to keep up to date with what's currently into effect with the Massachusetts law, what's going on with this and that, what's been implemented, what hasn't been implemented. How does that sit per the the parliamentary procedures that should be going on? And it's just because it's so complicated. And when you deal with something that's as complicated as Massachusetts gun laws, the idea of it being a deterrent also goes out the window, because if you don't know what you're doing wrong, then how do you not do it?
Oh, exactly. I mean, for instance, I moved here from New York, and it took me about 14 years before I finally decided that I was going to go and get my license to carry, because it was so much easier for me to just go into New Hampshire or go up to Maine and visit friends and shoot with them. And the thing that finally prompted me to do it was I started getting death threats. And I said, okay, you know what? Maybe now I should try to engage with this process, because now seems like a really good time to have a gun. And, not for nothing. As a queer person who lives in Massachusetts, I hear all the time that, like, oh, it must be so nice to live in a sane state. I'm like, oh, yeah, a sane state. Absolutely. A sane state that has homegrown Nazi organizations, all of whom are armed, and the governor and the legislature are passing legislation to make it harder for me, a queer person who lives in this state, to buy a firearm to defend myself against people who already have guns. Mm-hmm. Does that seem right to you? It doesn't seem right to me.
No, it does not. And this is why the Second Amendment is for everyone. And we do need to get rid of both the partisan language and the partisan support for it, because, again, left or right, the reason every political group has a reason to defend the lives of themselves and their community.
Yeah, I mean, clearly I 100% agree with that. Just to kind of wrap up my thought on those 5 pillars, because I know I don't want to take too much of your time on this, is practicality. You made the point of you're not really sure where the implementation is on some of this stuff. And I don't think anybody really is the problem.
Oh, that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Yeah. It's great. For instance, Firearm Control Advisory Board has decided that the roster that they're supposed to produce for approved rifles and shotguns, that's not going to happen, actually. The law does not, in their view, actually say or actually mean what the law actually says. Which, we're off to a great start on interpretation when the body that is responsible for interpreting and producing regulations looks at the law and says it cannot possibly mean what it explicitly says in black and white. Because for that to be true, it would be impossible. It would effectively ban every single rifle and shotgun in Massachusetts from being sold, because it can't pass these safety tests that are designed for pistols. That strikes me as an issue. It strikes me at the very least as poor drafting, and it's hard to view that as anything but intentional, really. And then, of course, there's the assault-style firearms roster that they're supposed to produce, but the problem there is, because the assault-style firearms definition is a features test, And because nobody seems to have any kind of clarity on what a copy or duplicate is, they have to put this big disclaimer up at the top of this roster that says, hey, just because it's not on the roster doesn't mean that it's legal. So, like, buy a gun, but we might put that on the roster later, and then you're screwed. And then equity, which, already touched on. I'm a queer person. I would like to have a gun because I don't like getting death threats directed at me, and I'd like to be able to respond in kind if necessary. This really kind of puts the kibosh on that for a lot of people who, unlike me, didn't get on this train back in 2022, who are now starting to look at the circumstances that we find ourselves in with this increasing escalation of fascist violence, whether it's state-sponsored or, we looked the other way on it. And they're living in a state that is ostensibly supposed to be safer for them, and realizing that they can't rely on the state to protect them, so they want to go and protect themselves, and the state is going out of its way to make it more difficult for them to do that. And that doesn't sit well with me at all.
Yeah, and further adding any expense to it, this state is most states, even the highest crime states, are really, really, really safe until you get to places that aren't. But the big issue with the places that are the least safe here in this state, they're almost always lower income areas, and the people there are almost always good people, and a few bad actors ruin it for everybody. But the reason why those good people are there is they either won't for historical reasons or can't for economic reasons move out. And also for economic reasons, they can't protect themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would even go farther and say that it really isn't even about bad actors. It really is about the circumstances that force them into those choices. Because, I'm a big fan of conversations about personal responsibility. I'm a big fan of making sure that everybody understands that, like, a choice is still a choice. But the fact of the matter is that if you're thrown into a desert and your options are, bleed somebody and drink their blood or die of thirst, I'm going to have a whole lot more sympathy for somebody who chooses violence in that circumstance. Still bad, still don't like it, but I certainly understand how they got there. And it was whoever dumped them out of a plane in the middle of the desert. So, I can appreciate the concern and the fear that a lot of people experience in those sort of higher crime neighborhoods, in those places that are like that because of the economic disadvantage that has been foisted on them by legislative inaction. I think a lot about how I have been doing advocacy work in some form or another in this state since about 2009. And one of the first things that I learned about when I started doing this advocacy work was that there was a group of survivors of child marriage who had been advocating to the State House for years before I moved here, before I started getting involved in things, who'd been advocating to the State House to get them to ban child marriage for years. Do you want to know when we got rid of child marriage in Massachusetts?
I have no idea.
2022.
They certainly didn't talk about it on the news.
They really didn't. It didn't make headlines all that well. Single-payer healthcare has been in front of the legislature in some form or another since before Mitt Romney was governor. Rent control is something that we've been talking about for the last decade. And people have really tempered their position on that to, like, rent stabilization, representation for people facing eviction ceiling, banning landlords from passing on their broker fees to tenants. All of these things are major game changers for people in terms of housing stability. Medicare for all, single payer healthcare, whatever you want to call it, that would have fundamentally altered my life about 10 years ago when I didn't have a job and needed surgery to save my life, and I didn't know what I was going to do because I couldn't get health insurance. And I can only think of if I hadn't had circumstances turn out the way that they did, what I might have done to preserve my own life, and would have been reasonable for me to do that. There's plenty of different illegal things that I could have come up with to make some money, and I'm hard pressed to blame anybody who would make that choice. And so the legislature sits there and they say, no, we're not going to do this. No, we're not going to do this. We're going to pass sports betting. We're gonna do that. We're gonna make conditions materially worse for the state because we're gonna make it legal to do sports betting and then have no regulation whatsoever to prevent people from falling into gambling addiction or anything like that. No, that's your problem now. Personal responsibility. We're gonna let the governor get away with getting rid of a rule that prevents DCF from blocking parents from fostering children if those parents explicitly say that, yeah, absolutely, we will abuse queer children because we don't agree with the queer lifestyle. We'll let them get away with that. We'll try to roll back climate protections and goals and standards that we had set for ourselves because, it's costing people who donate to us money to have to follow those. But we won't do anything good for you. And so when you look at this pattern, they fought against the Fair Share Amendment like crazy. And look how well that has benefited the state. And all those billionaires who said that they were going to get up and leave, they're still here. And so when we look at it from this perspective, at this pattern of what do they get done, and you start throwing gun control in that pattern and saying, oh, well, gun control is good, so we're okay with that. No, you have to look at the pattern. You have to look at the pattern. What do they do? The only things that they do are things that make them look better, or enrich them, or get people off their backs. And it's never anything substantive. It's never anything that is a real benefit to the people of Massachusetts. And so you look at this gun control bill and you actually look through it and there is nothing in there that meaningfully increases safety for the residents of Massachusetts. But hey, that's fine. We'll do their job for them. Just like we're going to do their job for them in November when rent control is on the ballot, when same-day registration for elections is on the ballot, and when representation for people facing eviction procedures is on the ballot. We'll do their job for them. We'll take this off, we'll put a thumb in their eye, and we'll say, no, we are not going to settle for you saying, hey, pat us on the back, look, we did a thing that looks like we did a thing. Because that's just not enough.
Well, I think that is that's a really great overall statement, and I totally agree. And this is a good time to start getting out the message to all the people in Massachusetts that yes, there's going to be a repeal of the of gun control on the ballot. I have some good feelings because getting those signatures was not easy, and that is impressive. But I 100% agree with you is that the messaging definitely needs to be more skewed towards the average Massachusetts voter if we want to get them to vote for it. And I'll say, just to sort of wrap up what I have to say, I've heard from a lot of people who support the repeal, but don't want to devote the effort to it because they think that no matter what, it's going to fail. And the thing that I would say to them very simply is, first, self-fulfilling prophecy right there. You put the effort in, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if you refuse to put the effort in, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And second, who cares if we lose? Fight. Fight and lose. It's better than sitting on your hands. Plus, if we can creep closer to 40% of people in support of repeal, that sends quite a clear message to the state legislature. And, not for nothing, I would hope they would listen to it. I think your rant on the various political things that they have taken inaction with, and I'll note that again, this is a deep blue state, and so some of our listeners may have an entirely different view of these issues than you do, Brendan. But note that the average Massachusetts person probably doesn't, and yet they choose they will ignore those things to go after gun control. So yeah, this is something that we need to get off the law books and start working to push back all the other garbage that we have that disenfranchises everybody of every economic, especially people of lower economic level, people that are more like the average Massachusetts voter. So Thank you so much for coming on, Brendan.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I touched on it briefly within the interview, but I just wanted to say again, obviously, Brett, we've all got our own politics, and some of our listeners may have found some of Brendan's political points to be not agreeing with their own, which is all well and good. We're a nonpartisan podcast here, but I will note that it is kind of breathtaking that a deep blue state like Massachusetts is willing to cave on some of these issues that are definitely well within the Democrat wheelhouse, but yet they can find time to pass gun control. It just adds insult to injury.
I really don't have anything to add. I just like repeating that one line from the 2010 film Edge of Darkness. Everything's illegal in Massachusetts.
I mean, it does seem like that every single day that I live here.
David isn't much of a fisherman, but he's here to tell us about the ones that got away.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Get a group of gun people together, and the topic will eventually turn to the guns they didn't buy or ones they sold. In either case, there will be a certain amount of regret over their decisions. So in this segment, I'd like to talk about the ones that got away. I've sold or traded a few guns over the years. Some I didn't mind seeing the back of, but for most, I do have a certain amount of remorse over the decision to sell them. For example, many years ago, I owned a Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III and a No. 4 Mark I. They didn't really fit in my collection at the time, and money was tight, so I let them go. They were both fairly nice, unmolested examples of their types, though the No. 1 Mark III did have a few modern replacement parts. When I look at the market now, and remember both what I paid for those two rifles and what I sold them for, I kind of shudder. Around the same time I acquired the Lee Enfields, I also picked up a Mauser 1908 Brazilian contract for a song at an estate auction. While it was a nice rifle in reasonably good condition, I never loved it and still don't feel any qualms about passing it on to a new owner. Right around the time the federal assault weapons ban went into effect, I bought a Ruger Mini 14 ranch rifle. It was the stainless model with wood furniture. As a fan of the A-Team TV show, I loved the look of this rifle, even though I could no longer get the classic folding stock at the time. While attractive, it was disappointingly inaccurate. From a bench rest with a 3 to 9 power scope cranked all the way up, it couldn't keep 20 shots on an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper at 100 yards. Even after a trip back to Ruger for service, accuracy wasn't significantly improved, so I let it go. This one was disappointing enough that I don't really miss it much. As Colonel Townsend Wayland was known to say, only accurate rifles are interesting. In the mid-1990s at an Albany, New York gun show, I picked up an SKS for under $100. This included the buttstock cleaning kit, oiler, sling, bayonet, and a couple boxes of ammunition. There was nothing objectionable about the rifle, but I found I just wasn't shooting it at all. This one I do regret selling. It would fit better in my current collection than it did then. On the handgun side, I wound up trading a Smith & Wesson Model 19-5 snub nose for the same model revolver with a 4-inch barrel. It fit me much better and was a companion on many hunting outings when I still lived in New York. While I do occasionally miss the snubby, its larger brother is a much better fit for me. In the mid to late aughts, a coworker moved to New York and started working on getting his handgun permit so he could reunite with his pistols. However, he eventually got frustrated with the process and gave me one of them. It was an earlier Taurus PT-111 Pro, a compact 9mm carry gun that was not at all lefty-friendly and didn't fit my hand well either. This one I have no regrets selling. Speaking of gifted guns, in the late 1980s, a friend was helping do some repairs in a house and found an old takedown Remington Model 12 Pump 22 rifle. The owner hadn't even known it was there, so they gave it to my friend as a bonus. He didn't want it, so he offered it to me. It was in rough shape. During its life, the fore-end wood had shrunk, and whoever owned it at the time tightened the screws to take up the slack. Unfortunately, this partially crushed the magazine tube, causing significant feeding issues. Also, someone had painted the metal surfaces with some kind of black paint. Not spray paint, because brush strokes were visible. That took a lot of time, effort, and elbow grease to remove without causing more damage. Finally, the rear sight had gotten lost over time and had been replaced with a bent piece of metal with a notch crudely filed into the top edge. Keep in mind, this was the days before the internet. While Numrich Gun Parts Corporation did exist, items had to be ordered from their catalog by filling out a form and mailing it in with a check. I was able to eventually replace the rear sight and magazine tube, and I shortened the fore-end screws so they wouldn't pinch again. After all that time and effort and some fun outings at the range, money was once again tight, so I had to let it go. This may be the firearm I regret selling the most. There were 2 or 3 more I passed on to other owners, but these are the ones that stand out in my memory. As for guns I wanted to buy but didn't, there are too many to list. One that comes to mind is when I was at a small gun shop in Connecticut and they had not 1, but 2 HK VP70Z pistols. One even came with the original factory box. The prices were very reasonable, just too rich for me at that time. Sure, the VP70 wasn't a great gun, but it's certainly an interesting one. Another missed opportunity was at the Cabela's in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. They had a vintage Webley revolver for sale, but I didn't know enough about them at the time to judge whether it was a good deal. By the time I gathered information and got back, it was gone. Lastly, and more recently, one of the surplus houses got a batch of Israeli-marked .22 long rifle Beretta Model 70 pistols. I was between jobs at the time, so couldn't justify the expense, but man did I want that gun. While there are always more guns to get, if we do ever decide we need to sell a gun, the phrase to remember is, no lowballs, I know what I got. Have fun and safe shooting.
Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video episode on ForgottenWeapons.com. Today we're out with a neat, somewhat unusual German pistol. This is an H&K VP70Z.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena Bock and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
When I saw the title of David's segment, I was pretty sure he wouldn't have picked my chosen sting.
And the grinding of the buzzsaw, what you want that thing to say? I said, don't misspell her name, but she's the one that got away.
He's singing about getting a tattoo of a woman that got away. And that not only with firearms, but sometimes with ladies, I contemplate the ones that got away.
Well, Weer'd, my question to you was, which guns have you sold and regretted?
I don't think I've ever really sold and regretted any. The closest I've got was I traded to Jay Grazio. I traded a Russian Mauser M44 for a Jennings J22, which financially and collectively is a very, very bad trade, but I have never brought myself to regret it. The closest I've had was guns that I was not able to get, very similar to David with the VP70, in the fact that one was a Russian 1891 Mosin Nagant I found in a shop in Vermont, and it was when we were up at camp at Lake Champlain, and I just was not prepared at all to buy or transfer a rifle, and so I let that one get away. The other one was I was at the Cabela's in Scarborough, Maine, and they had a Ruger Alaskan in .454 Casull for a pretty nice price. And I was all set to do the transfer, and they went, "Oh, sorry, we're not going to ship it to Massachusetts because, as you said, everything's illegal in Massachusetts." They didn't want to risk having to pay to ship it, to have it just come back and not make the sale and have the gun not in the gun case to be sold up until that point. And so that never went through. And thankfully for me, I have both of those guns in my collection now. How about you, Aaron?
I have never sold a gun, and that's not like a principle. It's that I have very few of them. I have to scrimp and save to buy them. And, well, actually, I take that back. There are a couple guns that I have that I would be willing to get rid of for a rather cheap price. And I think at this point I'm keeping them in case there's ever a gun buyback that offers a decent amount of money for it, or if I need to loan one to somebody that I trust, but I may not get it back. One of them is oh gosh, I don't remember who makes it, but it's a plastic 380. It's the Bodyguard. I want to say Smith & Wesson. And it just has the most horrible, unpleasant recoil. My mother bought it, and she shot it once, and she said, no, I'm not going to shoot it again. And so I inherited it. It's absolutely not a fun pistol. The other gun I have that I'd be willing to get rid of is a Sky in 9mm, which I was sent to review, not by the Sky Corporation, but someone with an FFL. And I had such a terrible opinion of it that I said, this is a piece of junk. I am not going to review it. I suppose I could do a hit piece on it, but, corporations have lawyers, and I just decided it wasn't worth it. And so, I'll go ahead and I'll send the pistol back. And for reasons I don't know, the guy just said, no, keep it. And I was like, okay.
Of all the guns to say that to me for.
I think it was his way of saying, yeah, it is a piece of crap. I don't want to deal with it. I'm just going to write it off as a loss. But just to keep, okay, this was like 10 years ago or something. It was after I had started Blazing Sword, but not long after, I think. But there were multiple failures to feed, failures to fire, failures to eject, and all of the magazines that I was given, the spring would frequently not advance the magazine follower upward. So it would strip off the first round and fire, and then the other rounds would just kind of rattle around loose in the magazine. It was just, this is not a gun. This is a gun-shaped object. I would not trust this to anyone that I cared about. This is the kind of gun that people joke about and saying, this is the one that you drop at a crime scene. It's just... And that's the one that I'm saving to sell, because to me, it is so unreliable and dangerous that it's worthless. And so if I get $50 or $100 for it, I'm ahead of the game. But I haven't sold either of them yet.
That might be a worthwhile option, but also given that Sky Firearms is no longer with us, I wonder why.
Oh gosh.
And so maybe if you're lucky, it will start getting a cult following like the Zip 22, which has actually started to command some pretty decent prices at auction, just because so few were made and it was so terrible that people want to get one just because. Is it really that bad? Yes, it is that bad.
I really wanted to like the Sky.
Me
too, because, well, not for the same reason, because they were located in Daytona Beach, where I am. And it's like, oh, cool, a hometown gun company. Yeah, I want to support them. I was so disappointed.
Yeah, I'm also a big... I liked it because it's... they were, small, compact, easily concealable, but double stack magazines, so they're a reasonable capacity, and they were offering them for really, really nice prices. And I am a huge fan of guns for the masses, and so I was very, very pleased to see the guns come out, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I love to have guns to recommend to people who are not made of money and need a cheap and reliable carry gun. And then I started asking people who were viewing firearms and seeing it, and everybody consistently was saying, yeah, no, they just don't work, which just sucks.
So basically the same experience I had.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, it's consistent across the board, and specifically their magazines were garbage. and there was so many magazine issues.
Gosh, you think?
Yeah, I have heard from some people that they bought like a pile of magazines and sorted through them, and like one in every 3 or something like that. And I could say this, I'm not quoting exactly, but they don't have lawyers anymore either. But that the magazines just wouldn't work. But ever so often you could get one that would work, and they would get those ones and mark them and like, this is a good one, and they could get the Sky pistol to work. But otherwise, yeah, no, it's a boat anchor. And actually, another interesting aspect is that your bodyguard is likely the 1.0. I just posted 2 pictures in chat. I assume the top one is the one that your mom had.
Oh, you posted it in the wrong channel. Oh yeah, definitely the top one.
Yeah, and so yeah, and the Smith & Wesson has come out with the 2nd gen bodyguard, which essentially looks like a little baby M&P, and that one is getting rave reviews as far as being a really, really nice gun to shoot. So also, maybe if you're lucky, there'll be a cult following for the one that they don't make anymore.
Okay. I mean, it'd be nice.
I'll just say, the H&K VP70 that David talks about, VP stands for Volks pistol. It was literally the Volkswagen of guns. It was designed to be a firearm that was inexpensive to make and could be easily made and distributed to people as a defensive arm. And it was really an awful gun. Like I know a lot of people who have had one just for the provenance. It was one of the first polymer framed pistols. It, predates the Glock and all that, but it's just, the trigger is awful. It's straight blowback. It's got like a fluted chamber, which makes it dirty as hell. It's really not a great gun. And so, but since they don't make it anymore and it's H&K, it's got a provenance. So they're selling for pretty, like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find one in good shape for under $1,000.
I also seem to recall that particular pistol, at least the ones issued to police, could be set for full auto. It was one of the first full auto pistols.
Not quite first full auto pistol, but definitely one of the more modern ones. But yes, it had very similar to the Mauser, of which there was like the Schnellfire, which was essentially very similar to this, on the fact that it was a little PDW version of the C96 broom handle. It had the shoulder stock that doubled as a holster, but the actual shoulder stock contained the actuator for the auto sear, and so you could attach the shoulder stock to it and set it to 3-round burst, but it would only fire semi-auto as a pistol.
That's rather clever.
Yeah. Ian's got a whole video on it in Forgotten Weapons. I'll throw it in there, and he shows how that works. But of course, David mentions the VP70Z for, I'm not going to butcher the German word for civilian, but the civilian starts with a Z in German. And so those ones specifically had the auto sear and the appointments for attaching the shoulder stock removed.
So do you know who doesn't have the appointments for the shoulder stock removed?
Our listeners, Aaron. It doesn't have to make sense. The sillier the better. Thanks to each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. To be our Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the ACP blooper reels, which are indeed hilarious, the ACP film tracks, which can also be hilarious, and the ACP mag dump, which those are also hilarious. We're funny people, Aaron.
I'm funny. You, not so much.
I sometimes smell funny.
Fair enough.
2 cannibals eating a clown. One of them turns to the other and says, "Does this taste funny to you?"
If I had a squirt bottle, Weer'd, I would be squirting you.
And I would deserve it.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off.
I've got a blog. It's weirdworld.com. That's WEERD and hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
I'm a good girl, but he's a bad dog. Our behavior is assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.